Think quickly. Who would you be today if you had never given in to other people's expectations? Imagine a pure, raw, authentic version of yourself, free from pressure, judgment, or social norms. Where would that person be now? The truth is brutal. Society shapes, conditions, and corrupts who we should be. And the most sinister thing, this doesn't happen by force. Society bends you with applause, with promises of success, with the fear of rejection. But what if I told you that Niccolo Machiavelli knew this over 500 years ago? That he foresaw how environment transforms character, not by accident, but by necessity. In the United States, this logic prevails with renewed force. Here, the so-called American way of life dictates that success trumps authenticity. The system rewards those who adapt, not those who resist. What was once a rebellious child becomes a cynical executive. The dreamer becomes a pragmatist. And those who insist on being authentic are left behind, forgotten, or crushed. The question Machiavelli raises is simple, but uncomfortable. To survive, you must transform yourself. But transform yourself into who? This is the dilemma we'll dissect in this video. To win the game of life, do you have to give up who you were meant to be? Machiavelli not only explains the mechanism, but also reveals the price we pay for corrupting ourselves, an invisible price you may already be paying now without realizing it. And the question I leave you with is, who would you have become if you hadn't been tamed by the gaze of others? Here, we'll peel back every layer of this silent corruption. We'll show you how Machiavelli gives you the keys to understanding the process where most fail, and what the path to maintaining control of your essence would be, even within this voracious system. But I warn you, the more you understand, the harder it will be to go back. Because self-knowledge, once awakened, no longer allows you to sleep peacefully. So be prepared for discomfort, for the doubt that won't go away, and for the awareness that perhaps who you are today is already a character created by the world around you. In The Prince, Machiavelli presents an essential concept called virtue, a blend of strength, cunning, adaptability, and control over one's own destiny. But what few realize is that, for Machiavelli, this virtue isn't born ready. It needs to be constantly adapted to environment, which he calls fortune, that is, chance, social, and historical context. This is where society comes in. The environment in which you grow, work, and live not only influences your virtue, it shapes, twists, corrupts, or perfects it. Machiavelli states that man cannot be good all the time because the world does not allow it. He says, it is necessary to know how to enter into evil, if necessary. This means that the environment determines how much of your virtue will be preserved or destroyed. In a competitive and cynical world like the United States, especially in large centers like New York, Washington, or Los Angeles, pure virtue, the kind born of ideal character, rarely survives intact. The environment forces the individual to be cunning or be swallowed up, and this process is silent. We don't realize when we begin to over-adapt. This idea connects directly to what we observe in everyday life. How many young idealists enter large corporations or politics with a sincere desire to change the system? And how long until they become part of the very system they criticized? Machiavelli would explain that this doesn't happen because they are weak, but because the environment imposes its rules. You either adapt or you are eliminated. Virtue without adaptation is political, social, and professional suicide. Furthermore, Machiavelli also suggests that there is no such thing as an immutable true self. Human beings are plastic, moldable. The problem isn't adapting, but losing control of this process. When you adapt unconsciously, without realizing the values you're sacrificing, society corrupts you completely. And when you wake up, you no longer know who you're supposed to be. Only the character remains. That's why Machiavelli's philosophical principle is so disturbing. You don't control the world, but you can and should control how much it transforms you. Otherwise, you're nothing more than clay in the hands of fortune. And clay, once it hardens, never returns to its former state. When we look at modern American society, we see a system structured to domesticate behaviors from an early age. Formal education, the corporate environment, cultural consumption, all reinforce acceptable standards of behavior. From childhood, you learn what to say, what to wear, what emotions to express, and what doesn't fit this mold. It's corrected, ridiculed, or excluded. The trick is that this process of conformity isn't overt. No one explicitly tells you you're being molded. But the entire system of rewards and punishments pushes you away from who you could be if you weren't concerned with pleasing others or fitting in. In the workplace, this becomes even more evident. An idealistic young professional enters a large company wanting to innovate, wanting to transform, but they soon learn that there's an unwritten script. Don't contradict too much, don't criticize the boss in public, don't be overly honest. The reward for good behavior is a promotion, a bonus, and recognition. And so slowly, those who were once authentic begin to don masks. They start to think twice before speaking their minds. They set aside their deepest convictions in the name of harmony. And with each concession, a piece of their identity dies. Machiavelli would be ruthless in his analysis of this. For him, the individual who doesn't understand the environment's game is doomed to be manipulated. He would write that the mistake isn't giving in, but giving in unconsciously. The true strategist gives in by choice, not submission. The problem with most is that they don't realize how much they've already surrendered to the environment. When they realize it, it's too late. They've become what they despised. The politician who once dreamed of reforming the system is now a defender of the status quo. The entrepreneur who wanted to do things differently is now obsessed with metrics and profits, not purpose. This also applies to personal relationships. In the United States, where social capital, who knows you, is as valuable as financial capital, being too authentic can cost you connections. So you learn to be pleasant, to hide your most controversial opinions, to soften your true colors. The price? A life of masks, where few know who you really would be if you weren't afraid of losing what you've achieved. And the most perverse thing about this process is that it's comfortable. Being who society wants you to be brings stability, acceptance, and security. Discomfort lies precisely in authenticity. That's why Machiavelli, if he were here today, would say that the environment corrupts you because you allow it, and worse, because you want it to. Because it's easier to be accepted than to be true. Many people, upon realizing this social game, fall into a classic error. They believe that being authentic is enough to resist the corruption of the environment. They believe that if they simply remain true to themselves, they will remain intact. But Machiavelli would be the first to laugh at this naivete, because for him, virtù is not raw authenticity, it is conscious adaptation. Anyone who tries to be merely authentic in a world of masks becomes an easy target, a romantic doomed to marginalization or failure. Authenticity without strategy is an invitation to isolation, contempt, or being devoured by those more adapted. In the United States, the be yourself culture is a popular but extremely superficial mantra, because no one says what happens when yourself isn't pleasing. The system only celebrates authenticity that generates profit, audience, or influence. Authenticity that disturbs, that questions convenient truths, is quickly silenced or ignored. And therein lies the error, thinking that being truthful is enough to win the game. Machiavelli knew that the world doesn't reward the good, but the clever. And cleverness is knowing when to hide or reveal who you are. Furthermore, most fail because they don't understand the timing of transformation. Machiavelli teaches us that environments demand different responses at different times. You can't be rigid. What works in one environment may be your downfall in another. The common mistake is to believe there's a fixed formula. If I'm authentic all the time, I'll win. This is childish. Real life demands Machiavellian flexibility. Today, you show strength, tomorrow, vulnerability. Today, you smile, tomorrow, you remain silent. It's all calculated. Another serious mistake is believing that the environment is only an external enemy. In reality, society is within us. The gaze of others has already been internalized. The fear of rejection, the desire for approval, all of this inhabits us. Therefore, resisting environmental corruption requires more than willpower. It requires awareness, strategy, and constant self-vigilance. Because corruption doesn't just occur in big decisions, but in the small, daily concessions you don't even realize you're making. Finally, the common mistake is to romanticize authenticity without preparing for the conflict it generates. Being authentic is to go to war with your surroundings. And without strategy, without preparation, without Machiavellian intelligence, you will be defeated. The world is not a place that welcomes those who are authentic. It welcomes those who know how to play the game. And those who don't learn this early end up complaining about corruption without realizing they've already been corrupted entirely. According to Machiavelli, the true strategist knows that it's impossible to navigate society unscathed. Sooner or later, you'll have to adapt, compromise, pretend, perhaps even betray some parts of yourself. But what differentiates the wise from the naive is that the wise choose when and how to become corrupt. It's a controlled process. The Machiavellian enters the social game, dons the necessary masks, but maintains an unalterable inner core. He plays by the rules of the world, but deep down, he remains true to his own principles, even if he never reveals them. That's the secret. It's not about being authentic all the time, but about knowing what will never be negotiable. This is what Machiavelli suggests when he states that men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands. In other words, what matters is what you appear to be, not what you really are. The mistake of the weak is constantly trying to prove who they are. The Machiavellian doesn't need to prove anything. He knows who he is inside and plays the game on the outside. This creates a silent, invisible, yet unbeatable power. In the American context, this path requires a complete mastery of appearances. The game of networking, social media, and apparent success, all of this is part of the facade. But while everyone else is concerned with being seen, the Machiavellian is concerned with not being read, with being an enigma. This prevents the environment from fully capturing him. He delivers what the world expects, but keeps the essentials for himself. And when the time comes to reinvent himself or turn the tables, he does so without remorse, because he always knew it was just a game. This is true virtue, knowing how to adapt without ever losing control of who you are. Those who apply Machiavelli understand that environmental corruption is inevitable, but that you can direct this process. You can choose what to yield, what to hide, what to transform, because the mistake isn't changing. The mistake is changing without knowing why and for what purpose. The Machiavellian changes strategically, not out of submission. Therefore, the path is not to blindly resist society. It's to manipulate it as much as it tries to manipulate you. It's to be a conscious actor on a stage of naive people. And those who master this art can navigate any environment, any system, without ever losing their power over themselves. It's not about escaping corruption, but about making it work in your favor. We've reached a moral crossroads that's hard to ignore. Who you are today, is it truly who you chose to be, or is it what the world made you? This Machiavellianly uncomfortable question has no easy answer. Society bends us in such subtle ways that we often don't even realize we've already been molded, compressed, softened, and most dangerously, we begin to believe that this domesticated version of ourselves is the original. But is it? Machiavelli didn't believe in immutable essences. For him, man is a project in constant reconstruction, always strained between what he would like to be and what the environment allows him to be. Therefore, he doesn't advocate blind resistance, but absolute awareness of the game. Wisdom lies in knowing to what extent you've allowed yourself to be corrupted, and whether there's still time to regain control. You may no longer be who you wanted to be, but you can still choose who you will be tomorrow, as long as you're willing to pay the price. The final reflection we leave here is brutal, but necessary. Could you list today what is still non-negotiable within you? Or have you already sold everything piece by piece without realizing it? Most prefer not to think about it, because facing this truth requires courage. The courage to acknowledge that, in exchange for comfort, success, or acceptance, you may have already given away everything that was most genuine to you. Machiavelli would say, there is only one path to redemption: strategic self-knowledge. Knowing who you are, who you pretend to be, and who the world wants you to be, and using this to your advantage. Real power isn't in being pure, it's in being conscious. And whoever masters this consciousness can no longer be controlled by anyone. Now, I ask you, what inside you is still yours? And what has already been given to society without return? Think about that before you put on your next mask.